that in his budget.
And on that point, I just want to show our viewers the front page of the Washington Times this morning. Social Security reserves forecast to run dry in 2022. Social Security's bank account will go bust in 2022, the first time the program's combined trust funds will run a deficit, according to President Obama's budget released on Monday. That's the only paper this morning that has that story. Louisville, Kentucky. Kenny, Democratic caller, you're up next. Go ahead.
Yes, in Social Security, we all know that once you make a certain amount of money, you no longer have to pay into that Social Security fund. I want to know why we're not all being given the same percentage towards our paychecks. Rich, poor, no matter what you are, paying into this same fund. It should be 10% or it should be 5%, whatever it should be to cover this problem that you keep saying is a problem for Democrats, or it's a problem for people that need it.
Well, I agree it is a problem. That's why we are pushing hard on the Republican side to address that problem. Now, raising taxes on a few won't make Social Security solvent. In fact, I think it extends its solvency maybe 5 or 6 years. I serve on the Social Security subcommittee. We've studied this issue at length. You know, Social Security, Medicare itself, we're going to require some common sense reforms, you know, that actually makes them solvent, especially for the younger generation. We're going to have to make some changes for them. The good news is there's good ideas out there, but we need leadership from this White House as well as Congress to get it done. That's why I think the public's sorely in need of some real leadership.
Dayton, Ohio. Tom, independent caller. Thanks for waiting.
Thank you for having me. Happy Valentine's Day to both of you.
Thank you, Tom.
I would like to have you and all the listeners, you know, fair trade. Go to Germany and look at their economy. They have laws to forbid their manufacturing from leaving. They make $45 an hour manufacturing. They get 8 weeks of vacation. They retire at the age of 62. I don't think Mr. Romney should pay 15%. I don't care what he does, and I'm paying 25 and 30% on $30,000 a year. If you guys think that's fair, something is definitely wrong with this country.
Congressman.
Well, I hate to correct your own tax example, but since I serve on Ways and Means Committee, if you're making $30,000 a year, you're not paying 25%. You're probably in the 10 to 15% bracket, if at that, depending on what your family is. And I think at the end of the day, when we look at our tax code, we see one of the most progressive tax codes in the world. Those in the higher incomes are paying triple what those in the middle class are today. The president's claim that millionaires are simply not paying as much as their secretaries just doesn't hold up. And in fact, a recent study of what people pay in America showed that not only do higher income pay dramatically more than the middle class, but that most of their income is actually ordinary income like you and I get through our paycheck. And so I think the Buffett rule has quickly become discredited. I'm always surprised the president keeps running on this issue. I think he thinks it sells back home.
On the dividends issue, though, here's the New York Post this morning. The source is the Office of Management and Budget. On dividends, taxed like any other income at a top rate of 39.6% is what the president is offering, up from the current top rate of 15%. What that caller was talking about, the hike would raise about $206 billion in new revenue. Is there an area between those two rates that the two sides could compromise, bringing it up some from 15%, but maybe not all the way to almost 40?
You know, probably not from our standpoint. Here's why. One, we double tax dividends. We tax them at the business side, then we double tax them when it's sent to a retiree. We also think that more and more Americans are actually relying upon those dividends for their retirement years. About half of the seniors in America rely on that dividend income. So we think taking more of what, one, they've already been taxed on once, and two, that they're counting on for their nest egg makes no sense. We want to encourage more dividends. We want to encourage more capital gain investment. So doubling or tripling the taxes on it, I think, works against the economy.
How are they relying on it? Are these personal investments that
Absolutely.
Retirees are making in a company?
Investing in stock, and more people. We have now really an opportunity society that's looking and making those long-term investments, many of them seniors, many of them under $50,000 a year in income. So I think this is a direct tax on the middle class, it ought to be avoided at any cost.
Westerly, Rhode Island. Al, Republican. You're up next for Congressman Kevin Brady.
Good morning, Mr. Brady.
Morning, Al.
Listen, here's the problem, really. Listen, President Obama, all he was a community organizer before he came into politics. He has spent, in his budgets, all he's looking to do is create more of an underclass. He wants to pour more money into the people who really contribute not much into this country. We're now at the border where 49% of the population pay nothing. This is absolutely absurd. So we got kids that are 26, they stay on their families' insurance. You can't sustain anything like that. You can't keep taxing people to carry people that really produce nothing. There's more people in the wagon that can pull it now. The people that are pulling the wagon can't afford it. You got generational welfare, this Medicaid, generational illegitimate children, and our prisons are full of them. It's got to stop. It's just creating an underclass like South America. We are destined to fail if we keep with these policies.
Kevin Brady.
Well, I think it's important we give Americans more than a fair shot just at food stamps or just at unemployment. We actually want them to have a fair shot at a career that lasts their whole life, that they can raise their family on. One thing that threatens that, I think, is the size of this government, what it does, the amount of money it's going to take from your pocket and mine to sustain it over the long term. We simply can't afford that. And I think most people don't realize that we're spending as a government $1 trillion more today than we were just 5 years ago. And the revenue this year will be the highest in history, except for 3 years. This will be the highest level of revenue coming into Washington. My thought is, and I think you agree, this is the spending problem we have, and we need to address that side of the ledger.
Bill Beatty has this to add to the conversation on our Twitter page about a May 2nd, 2011 Gallup poll. 67% of Americans polled then believe Social Security and Medicare costs are already creating a crisis for the federal government. Pam, a Democrat in Nashville, Tennessee. You're up next.
Oh, hi.
Morning.
Thanks for putting me on after the angry man.
Hi, Pam.
Hi. Basically, I just had a couple of comments to make. Earlier, you made a comment about illegal immigration and securing the border, but it is a fact that more illegal immigrants have been deported in 3 years under Obama than under 8 years of Bush. And two, when it comes to the Bush tax cuts, they have added over $5 trillion to the nation's debt over the last 10 years, yet Republicans want to make them permanent and still not pay for them, so that doesn't sound very fiscally responsible.
Let's take that point, Pam.
Okay, 2 points. One, the president's taking credit for the increased border security, the guards, the detention beds, the prosecutors, and the judges that President Bush put in place. I know this president likes to blame Bush for a lot of the problems in America, but in truth, in this case, he's taking credit for what his former predecessor already put in place. And secondly, you know, we believe at the end of the day that reducing what government takes from families' paychecks, what government takes from businesses' paychecks, especially those on Main Street, strengthens the economy, especially in tough times. And so we really believe, if you look at the facts, it's the spending over the last decade that's been the problem.
Westchester, New York. Gil, a Republican.
Yes, sir. I wonder if you could explain a little something to me here. Is it true that under the Obama health care bill, we're going to be charged 1% tax on all bank transactions?
On World Bank transactions?
On all.
On all bank transactions.
Not to my knowledge.
No, huh? Oh, okay.
All right.
There's plenty of other taxes in there on Americans, new taxes on Medicare, on medical devices, on what hospitals use, whether they're bedpans or new beds or instruments, all of which end up being paid for by you and me. But I'm not aware of a bank transaction tax within the president's plan.
We're talking about the president's 2013 budget proposal here with Kevin Brady. He sits on Ways and Means Committee. He's also the vice chair of the Joint Economic Committee. All things budget here for, I'm sure, the coming days and the coming weeks, and we're tracking it all on our budget hub. If you go to cspan.org/budget, you'll find everything that we've been covering so far over the past 24 hours, and as the testimonies and hearings will continue.
I like this budget hub approach. You know, I think more and more people are interested in exactly how all their tax dollars are being spent. So applications like that are hugely helpful.
Well, and the White House yesterday releasing an app if you wanted to download the president's budget to your smartphone. Did you do that?
No, I did not. But I know
suppose you get your own copy.
Well, we do. We do. Plus, we think Republicans have some pretty good apps on this budget as well.
So Republicans will put out their own apps on this.
Absolutely.
All right. Cincinnati, Gary, Independent. Go ahead.
Yes, I'd just like to make a couple comments. I think I don't believe there's any Americans anymore. It's either black or white, Republican or Democrat, and I think if you guys want to create some jobs, let's start training people how to read lie detector tests, and every politician that's out there, when you get on the news, take a lie detector test in front of the public, because you know that all the documents can be manipulated. The Republicans are looking at the same document and saying that the Democrats got it wrong. The Democrats looking at the same document saying the Republicans got it wrong. There's no Americans no more, man.
Gary, I think we got your sentiment. I understand it.
Gary, I disagree with you. I do believe this country is more divided than it needs to be. I get frustrated with our president because I think he spends a lot of time dividing the country rather than putting us back together. But I think back home in Texas, where my family and I live, I think we have different viewpoints, but I think there's still a belief that America can be much stronger than what we are today. And all you have to do is, for example, attend a soldier's funeral back home, and you'll see just how much we have in common, how much we care for each other, regardless of race or income or anything like that.
On the budget, it takes two to tango. So where would Republicans meet the president? I mean, what did you see in there that you liked?
Making the research and development tax credit permanent, I think, is a good move. We've fallen behind other countries in that area. They're very aggressively courting our companies today because they know, not only are they moving R&D facilities into other countries, but they get the technology and innovation that comes from those jobs overseas. So we need to be much more aggressive in ensuring R&D stays in America. And I think the president's proposal there, at least until we have overall business tax reform and make that a permanent part of our tax code, I think that's a good idea.
There's also some losers when it comes to federal agencies in here, and something Republicans have been talking about is spending cuts. So the EPA's budget is down, NASA's down, Justice. Do you agree with those spending cuts?
I do. In fact, I think we need to go further. I think the president's budget reflects the Budget Control Act that was passed last year. I think we need to go farther than that. And the trick is not to do just across-the-board cuts. It doesn't make sense. You have to set priorities. And one of my frustrations, in fact, I've introduced legislation to correct this. I want every president, not just President Obama, to submit an honest budget that actually lives within spending caps, gives us a solution on what we need to do on Social Security and Medicare, and prioritizes spending. In fact, the bill I've introduced, the MAP Act, requires every president to tell us in 5 categories where spending falls so that we can make the smart cuts and smart reductions rather than just sort of a ham-handed across-the-board cut.
We have some bullet points of the MAP Act. I mean, is this something where you're not doing a 10-year budget, that a president would have to do a 1-year or 2-year budget or something like that?
No, it's the 5-year budget for the president, but this bill puts guardrails around future spending so that we, over time, shrink the size of government. We put in place guardrails that future Congresses can't jump if they get uncomfortable with it. They have to stay within it. Requires honest budgeting by the president, honest budgeting by Congress, sunsets obsolete agencies, and we end forever the threat of government shutdown. We just think that annual gridlock and annual drama belongs elsewhere. And the truth of the matter is, what Washington tends to do is spend their way out of that gridlock rather than coming to a good, thoughtful solution.
Does it include a balanced budget amendment? Is that?
This does not.
Do you believe in that?
I do, but I think we need to go farther because the goal isn't to simply balance the budget. Many states do that. They do that through higher taxes. We think we need to shrink the size of government so that it's the size not only that we can afford, but that grows our economy at the strongest pace.
Back to phone calls here. Mary, a Democrat in Franklin, Tennessee. Go ahead, Mary.
They seem to be really out to destroy Social Security. I hate President Obama what he did about this tax break, it's suicidal, I think.
Which one are you referring to, Mary?
You know, the
payroll tax?
The payroll tax?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just terrible. I mean, he is so, this representative is so blatant about being against Social Security, and I'm scared. I'm really scared for our country. I just wish every citizen in this country was listening to this program today, and we'd get the Republicans out.
Well, Mary, hold on the line, because I think you missed the beginning of the program where we talked about Republicans have said, let's go forward with this payroll tax cut extension. And Democrats. So you think that if anybody is in favor of extending this payroll tax cut, then they're not in favor of Social Security?
Well, I'm talking about what Brady said. He said that they wanted to put changes in Social Security, and that goes along with the payroll tax cut.
Okay. All right. I
Great.
see.
Well, one, Republicans, I think most lawmakers went along with the payroll tax cut last year because we were told by the White House it was a one-year tax holiday. Now it's been extended to 2. We think that creates real problems long-term for Social Security if we don't fill that gap. Nonetheless, we're not carrying the day in that argument. The reforms we're talking about for Social Security don't affect you, don't affect, frankly, people who are 55 years or older today. But for younger workers, if we want to keep the promise to them, we're going to have to, over time, raise the age of Social Security gradually over the next 30 to 35 years. We are going to have to tie benefits to cost of living, real, accurate, honest, authentic cost of living increases rather than wages. If we do that, we can make Social Security solvent for every generation, not just for a few years, but once and for all.
We have about 10 minutes left here with Congressman Kevin Brady, and we're going to end the Washington Journal a little early today because we want to bring you live coverage of the Senate Armed Services Committee, where Defense Secretary Leon Panetta and General Dempsey will be testifying about the 2013 budget proposal, what that means for the Pentagon, and the Secretary facing 3 days of grilling up on Capitol Hill today before the Senate, and then on Wednesday he'll be back up there before the House Armed Services Committee. We're learning in the papers today, and this is likely something that will come up, Congressman Brady, at this hearing today. This is Bloomberg News with this headline: the Pentagon may have to oust troops involuntarily in order to meet their reductions in the budget plan. So soldiers, Marines, other members of the military may be forced out, even though they wouldn't want to leave, for the first time since the aftermath of the Cold War.
Yeah, I hope that's not the case, but Pentagon's facing right now $1 trillion cut over the next 10 years. It's serious cuts. These are real cuts, and you can go only so far in weapons reductions. At some point, it lands on those troops. I think that's a mistake. I think we ought to keep the troop levels and troop operation support whole. We ought to focus on reforms and how we spend in procurement there. But clearly, the sequester that's in place today is very damaging to defense.
What about procurement? Because this is the headline in the Washington Times. Replacement of those war-worn equipments are cut in the budget. So, we're winding down the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the Pentagon not planning to replace those old weapons. Is that a smart decision?
At the end of the day, they're going to have to weigh what are the priorities. I do think in procurement, we've done a poor job over the years spending dollars. It's a big budget item when you take them in their whole. Report after report after report shows we can create savings long term in the way we buy things, from uniforms to the most technology-driven new weapons systems. That's where our focus needs to be.
So a lot of waste in those areas.
Unfortunately, there is. In the procurement side of it, there is.
Let's go to Harold, a Republican in Erie, Pennsylvania. Harold, good morning.
Good morning. How are you? Thank you for CSPAN. Republican Brady, good morning.
Yes, sir.
And thank you for mentioning the fact that soldiers who pass away in combat, that we Americans, true Americans, and are still Americans, believe in those soldiers, because I spent 22 years there.
Yeah, thank you for your service.
You're welcome. Another thing I'd like to mention is all these Democrats that are calling in and saying that Republicans never pass anything Obama does. Well, on the last Obama budget, Democrats and Republicans voted, and Democrats were against it too. So it's not just Republicans, and there's only a 51 majority vote that has to be passed, and it's 52, I believe it's 52 senators in the Democrats. Why doesn't Harry Reid bring it up for a vote? Because he knows it won't pass, because it's a very poor documentary writing of the president, which he has done since he has been in. He has not done anything for the middle class. He hasn't done anything for the black people, to help the black people or to help the poor.
Okay, Harold, I'm going to leave it there and move on to Dallas, Texas, so I can get another phone call in. Pat's an independent. Go ahead, Pat.
Yeah, I have a problem with the representatives and you too saying that Social Security is bankrupt. There's $2.6 trillion in the Social Security Trust Fund, and since the Reagan administration, they've been taking our payroll taxes and using our payroll taxes for other programs and putting IOUs in the trust fund, but it is backed by T-bills, just like the money that we borrow from China. And so to say that the trust fund is bankrupt, it's good until at least 2037, and it certainly hadn't changed over the last few months. And the other thing, as far as
Pat, let me have the congressman respond, because he does sit on the Ways and Means Committee. This is an issue he looks at.
Yeah, I serve on Social Security as well. And I wish I could assure you that that was the case, that we had plenty of cash, plenty of revenue to cover Social Security, but we don't. We don't today. Again, we've borrowed $142 billion this past year just to pay seniors their checks. We'll continue to do that in the future. In fact, right now, latest projections, Social Security will run a cash deficit forever, the way it's put in place today, and we're actually having to go out and borrow the revenue, to actually borrow the money from foreign investors and local investors to pay for that. We think that's bad news for Social Security over the long term, and we think especially for younger workers, we have to find a way to keep it in place for them. So the reforms on Social Security don't affect you, don't affect my mom, don't affect those who are 55 or older, but for the younger generation workers, there's some common sense things we can do. That's the good news. There's some real good reform ideas to make sure that they actually get Social Security when they depend upon it.
New Haven, Connecticut. Chris, Democratic caller.
Hi, happy Valentine's Day. Representative, you raised the specter of our credit rating when you began this, and yet the same credit rating agencies that you're talking about are the same ones that rated bundled bad mortgages as AAA investments. How can we consider them creditable judges of our economic condition?
Well, you raise a great issue, and they were a contributor, no doubt, to the housing collapse and financial bubble that we had. What I was referring to was in the recent round of ratings analysis of America's budget, in which one of the agencies downgraded us, they made it clear that unless Congress and the White House address the structural deficits, especially the entitlement programs, which are so important, but because we have 10,000 seniors a day who are signing up for Social Security, Medicare, they can't be sustained. My argument is, since the president doesn't address these important programs in his budget, if we were to adopt it, which we won't, but if we were, it would create real stress on our credit rating, and I think that's the case.
I heard this morning on the way in that there's talk that Britain might get a downgrade as well from some of the credit agencies. What do you think that does to our economy? What do you think about the situation in Greece with the vote for more austerity in that country? You
know, that was welcome. It's critical for the U.S. economy that the European economy not have a financial run. In any given day, Europe's buying $1 out of every $4 of what we sell around the world. We have very close banking ties with them. If our economy was flying at 50,000 feet, strong and steady, turbulence from Europe isn't a problem. We're flying very low and very slow, so turbulence is a real problem. I think, the fact that Greece is already close to default, Europe is actually in a recession today, is going to slow our growth, but they need to stabilize so that they don't pull us into a double dip.
Congressman Kevin Brady, the conversation will continue. Thank you for making time and talking to our viewers this morning.
Greta, thanks for having me.
The hearing at the Senate Armed Services Committee getting underway. Senator John McCain, the ranking